And this goes back to overemphasis on hedges, overemphasis on reporting verbs, prescriptive approaches to the use of I. Now, why I find this framework useful, not just hedges, but all of this framework, is because when I'm teaching a particular genre, I ask myself, okay, which of these meta-discourse devices are common in the given genre that I should highlight to the students? So, for example, when I was teaching writing book reviews, we talked a lot about attitude markers because they enable the writer of a book review to evaluate the book reviewed. So there's more than just hedges, and different genres, different disciplines drawn these different meta-discourse devices to varying extent. Okay, thank you very much for bearing with me. So what I've done in this presentation is I hope to have provided you with some second-hand access to EAP Knowledge Base for teaching academic writing. And I hope you've found something interesting that you would like to follow up on to develop your knowledge in that particular area through first-hand access. But if it's too much, if it feels like a sea that you might drown in, then just stay with the second-hand access so that you can follow the road and be comfortable. So thank you very much. And these are my references if you're interested in following up on any of them.
Thank you very, very much, Millie. That was, I don't know, well, we'll see, we'll get others' comments and reactions as well, but certainly there was so much there, and it just reminds you that it's such a, the whole area of writing with students is such a in-depth, there's so much you can access. I think you alluded to that there just now. There's so much you can access, isn't there? And I think for novice EAP teachers, but also for experienced EAP teachers, it's kind of knowing, you know, where to go and where to start as well. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but I think we can also just open it up more broadly here. If anyone wants to jump in verbally with a question, please just do that. There's a few comments coming in.
I have a question just to kick things off, which is, Millie, this is based on a book that you've written, is that correct?
Yes.
Where can we get this book? What's it called and where can we get it?
It's called Teaching Academic Writing for EAP, Language Foundations for Practitioners. It's published by Bloomsbury. I would...
I completely missed that title. I'm so sorry. Would you mind popping it in the chat for us?
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not a fast writer. I couldn't get that down so quickly.
So I would propose that you suggest to your university library to buy it.
Which we have already in Edinburgh, I think.
That's the easiest way. You don't have to pay for it.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If you're able, if you're affiliated to a library, to a university, I should say, then ask your library if you can, if you've got a means to do that, to download, to get it for your university library collection.
Yes, got it. Well done, Sheffield.
Yes, and Carol is saying that she's going to be directing TEEP course participants to it as well. I'm just going to very quickly run through the questions. Angeliki, I think you had a question. If you want to just sort of verbalize that one. I don't know if you're managing to unmute yourself. Maybe you can't unmute yourself. Angeliki's I'm just going back up because I saw it coming in. Angeliki's question was about the sort of the hedging and the boosting and the disciplinary differences, and just being aware of disciplinary differences as well. I'm sorry, I'm just yeah. Does the calibration of staff depend on the discipline?
Yes.
Calibration of boosting and hedging has to do with the discipline mainly.
Yes, so I would say it's disciplines, it's genres, it's evidence, so on different levels. So hard disciplines have been shown to use less meta-discourse than soft disciplines, but it doesn't mean they don't use them at all. So again, that's like an extreme overgeneralization, which we need to avoid. So yes, there will be disciplinary differences, but also we need to think about the strengths of evidence.
Okay, thank you. There was a question, I'm not doing these in order, sorry, I'm just kind of running through the chat. There's a question from Alexandra as well, who asked about whether the idea of plain language, do you feel that that's becoming more popular in academic context, or are we still kind of harnessed to these conceptualizations of academic language perhaps being slightly more complex?
Yeah, so I think that would need a longer discussion. So I understand when people say, oh, academic writing is inaccessible because it's so complex, complicated even, and it should be more accessible, it should be simple English. However, academic writing and the academic language in writing developed in this way for a reason. Not to confuse readers, but because complex grammar allows us to express a lot of information in a very dense way. So that's why it's difficult to read, because there's a lot going on in relatively few words. So we can give the same information on in a much shorter space. So if you need to read an article which is shorter but denser, or longer in plain English, which one is better? Not necessarily one is better than the other. So I think it's misunderstanding that complexity serves information density. And it wasn't always like that. So the research that I mentioned in the register functional approach shows that chronologically it developed this way because there's more and more academic communication. There's so much information. So we need to communicate that information in a concise and economical way. And that's why academic grammar is so complex.
Yeah, because you're trying to express complex ideas sometimes as well. And sometimes you need slightly more complex language to do that. Not necessarily difficult or impenetrable, but just, bigger ideas need more space, don't they? I guess I said I'm running through. There's lots of very nice comments there, Millie, which I hope you'll be able to catch up with later, but lots of comments about how interesting and useful. I mean, I think you covered a huge amount within a very short space of time. Am I missing, can my colleagues here in the think, have I missed any questions? While you're looking for questions, there you can download your certificate of attendance. There is in the chat there for you if you want to get that. And I'm hoping that someone's going to post our feedback form in there so we can get some feedback on the session. What was I going to say? Sorry, you didn't mention voice in your talk, someone said. I think you maybe did a little bit, but do you think that's a redundant concept if we look at stance, reporting verbs, hedging and boosting and attitude markers? So yeah.
No, for me, it's the same thing. Voice and stance. I'm not sure if there is a difference, if there should be difference. So I use them to refer to the same thing.
Okay. There's a couple of questions in there. We have recorded the session, so the recording of this will be on our YouTube channel, whatever we call that. And they're also asking about the slides. If you're happy to share the slides with us, then we can also share those on our own website, the TED and EAP website. There's another question. I just found another question in there. Could you please say a few words about teaching grammar during an EAP course? I don't know if you want to expand. You did mention that a little bit, didn't you?
So yeah, I would say this is quite controversial. And sometimes people say, well, I only teach grammar incidentally. But I think there's danger that if we teach it just incidentally, we're only responding to student errors. So, oh, you've got an error here, go look at the passive voice because you're not using it well. And that overlooks that complex academic grammar that we need to help students develop, and not just for writing, but also for reading, because they need to be able to decipher those complex noun phrases. So for me, teaching academic grammar can serve two purposes and can be in two ways. One can be that corrective, we're trying to address student problems that interfere with intelligibility, that break the rules of English grammar, or they are not suitable in academic writing. But the other way is also developing students' language. And like I said, research has shown that students go through that trajectory, and it's both L1 English and L2 English students that they progress into more complex language. So if we just, how many times would you tell students, oh, this is good, but try to make it more complex? I think we can unknowingly get focused on addressing errors only. And of course, we don't need to teach all of grammar, but select areas that students struggle with on the one hand, and on the other hand, grammatical features, complex grammar, which is common to the register of academic writing and to particular genres, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a question related to that from Neil. I think it's Neil. On the subject of grammar, do you think that English in English for academic purposes has been forgotten? It sometimes feels to me that we teach content that could just as easily be taught to native speakers, but this is also neglecting the fact that our audience is primarily L2 speakers. So,
yeah, I think that's another thing that I've been hearing, that it's not about language. So yeah, perhaps we are forgetting English or language. And it's not just for L2 English speakers, I would say, because how can we separate content and language? So if we want to help students to express content, it is through language. So for example, today I was giving feedback to some of my students, and one said, it was a really long phrase, let me just find it. I don't think I'll be able to find it, but they kind of described something. Oh yeah, this one. The study area we use to illustrate our method. Okay, so that's a complex noun phrase which has an embedded finite clause, but it's very clumsy. So I suggested, why don't you just use the research site? And it doesn't matter if it's an L1 or an L2 English speaker, because it's about using that academic language. It's about using terminology that we express contents through.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So many questions coming in. I think we're probably going to have to draw things a bit to close, because we're coming up to, well, it is in fact 4:30 now, and we're conscious we need to also do our AGM as well. But I think we can maybe save the chat as well and get back to you about things. And I mean, there's generated a lot of talk, and as I said, there's such a lot you can talk about, and it's interesting. We were getting into feedback there as well, because that's what I was thinking about when you were talking, Millie, was about, you know, the teacher's knowledge base. It's knowing about all these things, but then it's also about that kind of knowledge of how to package that when you give feedback to students as well.
Yeah.
So there's such a lot in there, and yeah, plenty of food for thought. So I think we will maybe just draw to close this section. So many thanks again to Millie for sharing that with us. I think you've given us all lots of ideas. There's lots of thank yous flying up. If you want to send a nice applause emoji, you can do that as well, whatever you want to do. But thank you very much, Millie, for joining us today and giving us all those ideas and kind of trying to make sense of that very rich knowledge base that's out there as well, and thinking about how we can best use it to teach, and to also not just to teach, but also when we're working with other teachers for inductions and things, how we can work together to support that process of how you go about going into the classroom and teaching writing. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.